So moving up to question number 8, how can we do debugging and tracing in WCF? Now when we talk about WCF, it has a lot of complex events, and sometimes as a developer you would like to track these events and see that if there are any kind of issues happening in these events, or you would like to gather some data from these events. Now it's very difficult to go and debug these events using your simple Visual Studio .NET debugger. So what WCF has done is, basically WCF has his own tracing mechanism, and this tracing mechanism basically leverages your .NET tracing mechanism. So using this tracing mechanism, we can collect data from these events, and we can better understand, if there are any issues happening when your WCF project is running. So what we'll do in this question is that basically we will enable tracing, and we will see that how the tracing data is outputted to a XML file, and then we will try to analyze the trace file output. WCF has given a lot of ready-made trace objects, and depending on what kind of tracing information you want to capture, you can use one of these trace objects as per your needs. For example, that let's say that you want to just trace data when the WCF service has been authenticated and authorized. So you can basically go for the system.service-model.identity-model trace object. In case you want to go a bit further and say, okay, that I want to basically log every message that comes into the WCF system, or every message flow that occurs through the WCF system, then you can use system.service-model.message logging. So depending on your debugging needs, depending on your tracing needs, you can choose one of the trace objects and accordingly use in your WCF project. Now what we'll do is that we will take up the system.service-model trace object, and let's do a small practical to understand how we can basically capture trace data and how does it look like. So here's a sample project which we'll be executing in order to understand that how we can basically enable the tracing functionality in WCF service. Basically, to enable tracing functionality in WCF service is a 4-step process. Okay, you can largely classify that there are 4 important steps which you can say 4 basic steps at least you need to execute in order that your tracing functionality can be enabled on a WCF service. So the first step is that you need to open your web config file and include the system.diagnostic XML element. Okay. The second step, you need to provide which trace object you will be using in order to trace your information. So at this moment I am saying that I am going to use system.service model. You need to also provide the switch value information. We are not going to discuss too much on the switch value here currently, because there is an independent slide which I have made where I have explained the switch value in more detail. And the final step, you have to say that how do you want to log this information. So whatever tracing information you are collecting from system.service model trace object, how do you want to log it? So at this moment I am saying that I want to log the information in an XML format, and I want to log the information in the C drive with a file name called as traces.svc log. So that's my project. So this is the only information which we need to include in our web.config file so that the tracing is enabled. So now let me go to my project. Let me execute my project. It's not something big. I've just made a simple button, and this button basically calls the default function provided by WCF project. Okay. Now let's go to a C drive, and you can see that there is a traces.svc log. Now if you open this file, let me open this in a notepad, you will find here tons of information which you can use for debugging and tracing your WCF project. Now definitely this means I'm going to say it really is not readable using the notepad. So what you can do is that you can basically, using the Microsoft has given something called as a svc trace viewer.exe. This you can get from C program files SDK Windows version 6.0a bin. In case you don't get it, you can download it from Microsoft itself. So using this trace viewer, let me run this. You can open that XML file and you can read the file in a much readable format. You can view the file in a much readable format. So let me open that file. It's in my C drive. Let me browse to my C drive. That's it. So here you can see that basically the information is in a much readable format, and you can basically understand a lot of things in a more clearer way than in a notepad. One of the properties we did not discuss in the previous practical is the switch value property. Now the switch value basically signifies saying that what level of tracing you want to log in. For example, you just want to log in the headers, you just want to log in the errors, or probably you want to log in the errors and the informations, or you want to log in the warnings. So what kind of tracing information depth you want to look forward or you want to log. So switch value basically signifies that what is the level of tracing you want to enable in your project. Now these are the different values you can put in your switch value. For example, if you want to just log in the critical errors, for instance, let's say that there is an unhandled exception, you just want to log in the unhandled exception, then you can specify the value here as critical. In case you are saying, okay, I also want to probably log in only warnings, then you can specify comma warning. So in this way you can specify various values and you can control, you can have a more granular control on what level of information or what level of trace information you want to process in your project. So I will not be explaining more detail into the other things. You can pause and you can see this slide and you can see that what level of tracing you can enable in your project. Now when we talk about WCF service, there are two important things. One is a transport and one is a service. Now transport is nothing but your protocols, that is your HTTP, FTP, MSMQ, whatever the different bindings and protocols supported by WCF. The second aspect is your application, that is at a service level. So sometimes what happens is, you probably just want to concentrate on message at a transport level, or you want to concentrate on message only at a service level. That means what's happening inside the application. So WCF has given one more mechanism, and that mechanism is called as a message logging. So using the message logging XML tag, you can specify that you want to log messages which come at a service level, or you want to log messages which come at a transport level. And in case you want to go a bit further, you can probably say, okay, using both of them. So whatever it is. So depending on your debugging needs, you can zero on more, or you can narrow your tracing information more from these two aspects. Now definitely there are other values over here, like log in the entire message true, malform message, max message log, etc. But I will not be discussing more of these because these two properties are the most important one. So in case you want to say, okay, I want to just see tracing information at a protocol level, then you need to enable log message at transport level equal to true. And in case you want to bypass all the transport level information, you can give a value false here, and you can just say log message at a service level as true, and it will only record tracing information which happen inside your WCF application. So these are the various values, or these are the various properties for the message logging tag. And definitely, depending on your debugging needs, you can take these values and enable your tracing mechanism accordingly.